Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about the hiring process and some interview tips for those who are looking for an accounting or finance job in the NHS. Now, you might be wondering, well, why the NHS? One, the NHS is one of the sectors that I happen to have experience of, so I can really share with you some of my experience working in the NHS, but also from my experience, I have realized that the NHS happens to be one of those sectors that is actually very lenient towards those who are looking for entry-level roles and may not have the equivalent historical background in finance to actually support that. So if you're in a position where you're looking for an accounting and finance role and you've tried other sectors and you're not having much luck, I would say that the NHS might be one to consider. Okay, emphasis on might. Okay, you really do have to do the entire research for yourself. But let's dive straight into the video. So what we're going to talk about then today is we're going to start by talking about what the hiring process might look like for someone who is applying for an accounting and finance job. And then I'm also going to touch a little bit on the interview tips, some interview tips that I would share. And then we're also going to touch on what happens if you fall into the category where you don't actually have any relevant NHS experience in and of itself. Okay, so if you're new here, my name is Tess and I'm a UK qualified accountant, and on this channel I share videos to help those who are looking to secure accounting and finance jobs here in the UK. Now, if you ever want to work with me either for a CV review session or indeed a career consultation session, then feel free to use the links in the description box below. So let's dive straight into a little bit about the hiring process. What exactly does it look like? Now, the hiring process will typically start with you going on the NHS jobs website. Okay, I know I definitely shared this website before, and if you're new to my channel, then do make sure you check out the videos I have already created around accountancy jobs websites, and you will also find a list of other highly recommended jobs websites for those who are looking for accounting and finance roles. Okay, so back to NHS finance then. So you will start by applying for a job on the NHS jobs website. Now, one of the things you will also notice is that within the NHS, the jobs are usually graded, okay, by pay bands, okay, and you will start anywhere from a band 1 right up to a band 9, and then there's also much higher bands above band 9 called like VSM and ESM, etc. So if you are someone who's looking for an entry-level role, typically you will find that maybe you are looking for roles that fall within, say, band 5 to band 7. This really depends on how entry level you are. By this I mean, are you entry level at the point of you coming in with AAT, or are you entry level that you're coming in with GSEs, or you're coming in with just a degree, for instance, with no prior experience. So depending on what kind of category you fall into, you might find that band 5 roles are more suited for you, or band 6 roles are more suited for you. Typically though, you will find that if you're someone who has finished university, you finished your degree, and you're looking for an entry-level role to kind of help train you, then I would say that you're probably looking for jobs that fall within maybe band 6/7, but sometimes it might fall into band 5 or band 6. It really depends on the role itself. It might also depend on the location as well in some instances. Now, I want to touch a little bit on, the application itself. So when you found the job that you want to apply for, you will typically then need to create a sort of personal profile, okay? A profile on the NHS jobs website itself. You would apply for that job, and as part of applying for that job, it's slightly different within the NHS because they don't tell you to upload a CV and cover letter per se, but you will be able to, include relevant experience within the portal for that particular job. And then towards the end of the application, you will be asked, usually as a minimum, to submit a supporting statement. Now, that supporting statement will usually have a word limit, approximately in most cases the word limit is about 1,500 to 1,800 words. You might also find that depending on the job that you're applying to, some recruiters may also include additional questions that they want you to answer on top of also submitting your supporting statement, and they will include this usually somewhere on that form as well. Okay, so it will be compulsory for you to not only answer the supporting statement within the word limit, but you will also have to answer any questions, any additional questions rather, that the recruiter has included as part of that job. Now, you want to pay close attention to the person specification for any job that you're applying to. This is because the person specification itself is really giving you huge clues as to what type of person that recruiter thinks will be a great fit for the job. So if they are saying that within the person specification, they want someone that has, you know, a high level of budgeting experience or an entry level budgeting experience, I'm just using this as a random example, then you want to make sure that within your supporting statement, you are making sure that you put an example of where and how you can match that. Where have you shown within your historical job experience that you have budgeting experience? If they ask within the person specification that we need someone who can communicate to a wide variety of stakeholders and has great presentation skills and communication skills, then you need to be able to basically evidence that on your supporting statement. So this is what I mean by it's going to be very important for you to really, you know, go through with a fine-tooth comb on the person specification to see how and where you can evidence how you meet the criteria that they have put in the person specification. Emphasis on the essential criteria of the person specification. So that is a little bit about the hiring process. Obviously, once you've done this, then you submit the actual application, and usually if you're successful, then you will hear back from them via email and they will invite you to an interview. So let's go on then to talk about the interview steps. Okay, what might happen now as part of the interview steps? You might find that you might have to prepare certain things ahead of the interview itself. Usually that might include you preparing a presentation, okay? It might also include you maybe thinking or completing a particular type of exercise or preparing some kind of material in advance of the interview date and time itself. But if you have any of these to prepare for, they will usually tell you well in advance, or at least a couple of days in advance. It really depends. Some of the things you might expect on the interview day itself might be that you are doing some kind of exercise, okay? Whether that exercise is carried out on Excel, it might be a budgeting exercise, it might be an exercise that is testing your knowledge of debits and credits, particularly if you're an entry-level person, okay? Also, you want to think about some types of questions that will come up during the interview and prepare well in advance for them. Typical questions that you might need to plan for might include, why do you want to work for the NHS? This is very important because remember, the objective of the NHS is going to be different to the objectives of, you know, a company within the private sector, because the NHS falls within the public sector. So the private sector, really their primary objective is to make a profit, okay, to make money. But that is not the case for the NHS. The NHS's the NHS's primary objective is improving the lives of its patients, okay, and the public in general. So you need to make sure that you have really thought well in advance about what they call answers to your motivational questions. So why do you want that job? But more specifically, I would even go as far as saying consider answers to them possibly asking you questions on why do you want to work in finance specifically, right? Especially if you're an entry-level person who has not had any finance experience at all. The interviewer might be keen to understand, well, You might have studied the degree, but how do I know that deep down you don't actually want to work in an IT role, for instance, or you don't want to work in HR? So they may or may not test your motivation for actually wanting to work in finance in and of itself. Now, I would also say that apart from the motivational style questions, other categories of questions to bear in mind will include, trying to assess how you will deal with stakeholders. Now, it's very important to understand that, as much as many people think that finance is an isolated function, so to speak, we just imagine an accountant typing away in the background somewhere. In today's day and age, it is not that, okay? So majority of finance roles very much have to work with stakeholders. And one of the ways that they are going to make sure that they see how well you do this is by asking you questions, okay, around how you work with stakeholders. This might come across as them asking you to basically give an example of how you communicate with a particular, difficult stakeholders. It might also be around them testing, how well you communicate, particularly when they give you, a presentation to prepare. They're actually really trying to test your verbal communication skills, your presentation skills, because sometimes you might find that some of these finance roles will require that you are able to, give training to stakeholders on a regular basis. And what better way for them to know whether you're capable of doing that than to give you a presentation test, right, on the day of the interview itself. Now, this is not for every single entry-level role, but this is something to bear in mind because it could very well, be that you're in the position where they are asking you to do that. Now, I would say that another thing to bear in mind is that they may very well ask you specific questions related to the job itself, like I would say technical questions. So if you're an entry-level person, you might find that they're asking you questions to test your knowledge around debits and credits, okay, to test your knowledge around assets and liabilities. Depending on the grading of the job itself and what the job entails you to do, you might find that they are asking you questions around, the budgeting process, or, around capital, or around how certain aspects of the finance function works. So it's important for you to also bear this in mind. I would also say that whilst you are also preparing for the questions that they might ask you, you want to also consider what questions you will have to ask them at the end of the interview stage as well, because, it is always a terrible idea for you to go into an interview, and when you get to the end of the interview, you get asked, so do you have any questions for us? And you're like, no. It looks very bad, and it shows that you may not have as much interest in that job as another candidate who actually prepared some questions to ask at the end of the interview. So definitely do think about typical types of end of interview questions that you might want to ask them at the end of that interview. Those are a few interview tips that I would definitely share to someone who is looking for an accounting and finance job in the NHS. Now, what if you fall into the category where you don't have any NHS experience? Because I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of people who might have stumbled upon this video may actually not even have any NHS experience. Now, I would say in the first category, okay, you might fall into the category where you have finance experience, but it's just not within the NHS. I would definitely still suggest that you apply to the NHS. This is because there are thousands, okay, loads and loads of people that I personally know who have been able to transfer from one sector to the NHS. So it is definitely highly possible if you are looking to, cross over from one industry to another. Now, what if you are in a situation where you don't have any experience at all? Okay, you don't have any experience from any sector. You're just finishing school, you're finishing your degree, and you have no relevant NHS experience. I would still highly suggest that yes, you make the application. And this is because, as I said earlier on, I have worked in the NHS, and for me personally, in my opinion, the NHS continues to remain one of the most lenient sectors, i.e. in that they consider and they're very open to bringing in people who, one, have little to no experience, and also two, who are coming with experience from other sectors. Now, I would say that you'll have a higher probability of being successful in these jobs, okay, with no experience, as long as you are showing, you know, strong motivation and desire for that particular job, and as long as you're showing that you have, you know, the willingness to learn on the job, and that you can also ideally show to the recruiter how whatever current skills and knowledge you have can be applied to that particular job that you're applying for. Okay, so I wouldn't discount the NHS just because you think that, oh, I don't have any NHS experience, or I've only ever worked in the private sector, why would the NHS consider me? You will be completely surprised as to the backgrounds of a lot of people that work in the NHS, and you'll be shocked to learn that many of those who have long-standing years of experience within the NHS and have, you know, thrived in their careers actually did not start within the NHS. So it is highly, highly possible for you to start your career journey within the NHS, or indeed transfer into the NHS. Now, hopefully this video has been very useful for you. Do check out some of my other videos on my channel, particularly around accountancy job websites if you're looking for a job, and also do make sure you use the links directly in the description box if you are keen to learn more about the CV review sessions that I offer, and also any one-on-one career consultation sessions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.